יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה ועמדים כחירותי והמליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמרה מבורך לעולם ולעולם בעולמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתברך ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי קודשא ובריחו לעילם לעילם מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה ועם ירן בעלמה ואמרו Amen. Let his name be glorified and sanctified throughout the universe which he created according to his purpose. May he bring about the reign of his kingdom in your lifetime, in your days, and in the lifetime of all the house of Israel, speedily, soon, and let all say, Amen. Let his great name be praised forever and ever, eternally. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, extolled and honored, magnified and lauded be the name of the Holy One, blessed be he, although he is far greater than all blessings, hymns, praises, and songs which are offered in the world. And all say, Amen.
He is far greater than all the blessings, hymns, praises, and songs which are offered in the world. Which is why we then raised the question on pages 44 and 45, who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Came in response to a song that Moses and the people of Israel sang at the sea, because they saw what God had done at that sea. And so, we read on the middle of 45, praise our exalted God. Blessed is he who is to be blessed. Moses and the people of Israel sang a song to you with great joy as they saw what you had done, and as they all said, now we also all say,
who is like you, O Lord among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders? Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tahilot osef elei. Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tahilot osef elei.
And of course, it's now our opportunity to answer the question that we raised as we turn to pages 88 and 89. And our response is Ein Kamoka, as we rise in his presence and acknowledge truly there is none like you, O Lord among the gods. You are glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders.
Ein chamocha ba'elim Adonai, ein chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tahilot osef elei, osef elei. There is none like you among the gods, my Lord, and there is nothing that compares to your deeds. Your kingdom is a kingdom that endures for all eternity, and your sovereignty extends throughout all generations. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai himaloch le'olam va'ed. The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord shall reign throughout eternity. The Lord will bless his people with peace.
Your sovereignty extends throughout all generations, we said. Now as we turn and face Jerusalem, once again, we respond on pages 34 to 39 with the Shema, where we in effect say, your sovereignty I acknowledge and request will extend throughout all of my life. Pages 34 to 39.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אלוהים יצווך ביום על לבבך ושננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושבתך וקומך וקשרת פלגות על ידך והיו לטוטפות בעיניך וכתבת על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Blessed be he whose glorious kingdom is eternal. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates.
Turning back to pages 88 and 89, we're reminded that the reality we proclaim for ourselves will be the reality that is proclaimed throughout the whole world. As Vayechi even so reminds us, for from Zion will go forth the Torah and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem.
ויהי בנשוא הארון, ויאמר משה, קום אדוני ויפוצו אויביך, וינוסו משנאיך מפניך, כי בציון תצא תורה, כי בציון תצא תורה, ודבר אדוני מירושלים. ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה תורה, לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. And it came to pass, whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah to his people, Israel.
And his people, Israel, and those who joined together with them now respond on pages 133 and the insert page to this great gift that he's given to us.
The ark now unveils its treasure.
To our eyes and minds and hearts.
Inside the scroll of Torah stands.
It stands there with all its richness and wisdom.
As we listen, voices speak, the voices of our ancestors.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, and Moses.
O God, they bring us your instructions for us.
Sarah,
Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and Miriam speak to us as well.
O God, they move us to respond to your promises to us.
we are grateful
And your words, the words of Torah.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord calls.
We will hear your words that we may learn them, love them, live them.
What does the Lord require of you? To fear him, love him, serve him, and walk in all his ways.
What the Lord has said, we will do.
The Torah of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The teaching of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple.
The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes.
Happy is the one that walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful.
But our delight is in the Torah of the Lord, and in his Torah we will meditate day and night.
We shall be like a tree planted by streams of waters, that brings forth its fruit in its season.
And whose leaf does not wither, and in whatever we do, we shall prosper.
A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you.
For my ordinances which I command you are not too difficult for you.
Neither are they far off.
Do we make the Torah void through faith? Not at all. We establish Torah.
So
And the Torah is holy, and the commandment is holy, just, and good.
That the righteous requirements of Torah might be fully met in us, who do not live according to our evil inclinations, but according to the Ruach Hashem.
The day will come when my Torah will flow from Zion, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem.
Mi shebarach avotenu Avraham, Yitzchak, ve'Yaakov. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. May he bless Carrie, may he bless Diane, may he bless John, and may he bless Mike, who have come up to honor God and the Torah. May the Holy One bless them and their families, and send blessing and prosperity on all the work of their hands. Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach. Baruch Adonai hamorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, ve'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Bless the Lord who is blessed. Bless the Lord who is blessed forever and ever. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave to us the Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim 17 shana, Vayechi yemei Yaakov shnei chayav 7 shanim va'arba'im Uma'ashana. You may be seated. And as it happened, Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. And the days of Jacob, actually what it says, the days of Jacob's life, or the years of his life, now comes the total, were 7 years, plus 40 years, plus 100 years. In case you couldn't add very quickly, that was 147 years. And this begins the end of the book of Genesis, Vayechi, and the end of those wonderful stories that are part of this book. But more on that in a few minutes. But you know what comes next. It's your turn to read the text, which you will find in the first inside page of your bulletin. So, here we go. Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim sheveh asrei shana Vayechi yamei Yaakov shenei hayav sheva shanim va'arba'im uma'at shana. Very well done. But the reading's not done yet. So I invite you to stand one more time. We talked about the conclusion of the book, and here is the conclusion of the book, if I can find it. Okay. Vayamat Yosef ben Ma'ah va'eser shanim vayachantu oto vayesem ba'aron b'Mitzrayim. Interesting text. And Joseph died, being of age 100 plus 10 years. And then Joseph was mummified. There's a better term for that than that. But that's what's going on here.
On ice. On ice.
Yeah, how nice, okay. And he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. So the text concludes very positively with Joseph in a coffin. I say positively, but I won't tell you why, because I'll tell you why next week.
Remain standing.
Oh, I'm sorry. You can sit down. That's what you meant by "are we finished?" I got the cue from the cantor and didn't pick up on it.
Genesis chapter 49, verses 8 through 11. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your friend will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nation shall be his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch.
I'm reading from Genesis chapter 50, verses 18 through 21, and then 24 through 25. And his brothers too came, prostrated themselves before him, and said, "Here, we are your slaves." But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You meant to do me harm, but God meant it for good, so that would come about as it is today, with many people's lives being saved. So don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your little ones. In this way, he comforted them, speaking kindly to them." Joseph said to his brothers, "I am dying, but God will surely remember you and bring you up out of this land to the land which he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Then Joseph took an oath from the sons of Israel, "God will surely remember you, and you are to carry my bones up from here."
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and life everlasting planted in our midst. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
He gave to us the Torah, not just to our ancestors, but to us as well, as we were reminded not many weeks ago when we concluded the book of Deuteronomy. And so as they received the Torah, so also we do now, as we stand and we respond on pages 98 and 99 with the Zot HaTorah. If you need a transliteration, that's page 95.
V'zot HaTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe. This is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel. It is in accord with the Lord's command by the hand of Moses.
You may be seated. Etz Chaim on pages 96 and 97 reminds us that these words are to impact our lives deeply, and so our responses renew our days as a whole.
Etz Chaim hi lamachazikim ba betomkei hameushav dera'eha darchei Noam bechol netivoteiha Shalom. Hashivenu Adonai Alecha v'nashuva. Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu k'kedem. Hashivenu Adonai Alecha v'nashuva. Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu k'kedem. A tree of life it is to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days as of old.
On pages 98 and 99, Vayechi ben Soar reminds us that we get to stand as priests in his presence, so we do in fact stand and we respond with gratitude and love for the standing that he's given to us.
Uvnocho Yomar, Shuba Adonai Rivavot Alfei Yisrael. When the ark rested, Moses would say, Return, O Lord, to the myriads of Israel's families. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and your mighty ark. Clothe your priests with righteousness. May those who have experienced your faithful love shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return of your Messiah. I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah.
Please greet one another as we greet one another here. Says the guy who's still up front.
I know it's not through your mind, though.
As I said just a few minutes ago, we've come to the end of the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis. It's been a wonderful book full of all kinds of interesting, I would like to call them stories, but they are stories in history. They are in fact historical. From the very beginning, when, in a sense, God exploded the worlds into being, rushing quickly through the opening chapters and the opening events of the history of the world and of the universe, then all of a sudden, breaking suddenly. I did say that all of a sudden and suddenly, didn't I? That's good Hebrew. Lousy English, but good Hebrew. To stop for the story of Abraham and his descendants. And that story, in effect, carries us to the end of the book. But you remember that story involves Abraham and the wonderful things God did for him. It involves Isaac. And the amazing sacrifice he was willing to make. It involves Jacob, the man who was not once but twice blessed by God. A man who was called Ishtam, a blameless person. And then, as Hanukkah approached, we started the story that ends the book, the story of Joseph. And it's that story that, we conclude the Jacob story and the Joseph story in tonight's Parsha. It begins in Genesis chapter 47, verses 28 to 31. And as we go through these closing sections, and I'm just going to hop, skip, and jump over some of the texts in this Parsha, we'll find, if we are paying attention, some patterns, some pictures, and some principles as God blesses those he promised to bless. The text begins, as read to you, that it was about time for Jacob to die. And so the text talks about Yemei Yaakov, and then what's interesting is in that first text, or the first part of the Parsha, we didn't read it, it's the next line that we read. It talks about Yemei Yisrael. So you begin to see a very interesting I don't know what to call it, but a sort of a shift taking place from Yaakov to Yisrael. Let's please remember that both of those were his name, Jacob and Israel, and continued to be his name. But it's as if the text is suddenly hinting for us that the focus is going off of Jacob the person to Jacob the people, from Israel the person to Israel of the people. And as it does so, there may be a reason here, and in a sense I sort of hinted at it when I read the text for you. If this is the closing of the book of Bereshit or Genesis, what comes next? Hello? Shemot, beginning of Exodus. Right? In other words, this then becomes the lead into Exodus and to Israel, the people in Egypt. Another thing that takes place in this text is perhaps you might call it the final transfer from Yaakov to Yosef. Because the text then reads for us, Vayikra livno leYosef. Or in other words, Jacob now, as he's about to die, called to Joseph, his son. But what's striking is, we know it's his son. All the readers and hearers of the text know it's his son. But the author chooses to emphasize these words as Moses wrote them. Livno, his son. And then Jacob makes a very interesting request. In order to save time, I won't read all of this in Hebrew, then translate in English. I'll just work from the English. He says, in a very interesting formation or structure in Hebrew, if it should now please you, or in other words, the Old English used to say, if it is possible that I have now found favor in your sight, let me stop there for a second. The way in which that's structured indicates that this is a statement of great honor and respect. Honor and respect from Jacob to Joseph. In other words, from father to son. That's usually the reverse of what goes on. It's a statement of great honor and respect, and the fact is that it's aimed at the son is stressed by the insertion of the word livno, his son. And the son, the father asked the son to extend something to him. If I found favor, or if you should so please. But the Hebrew term is chen. Chen means favor, not just favor, but mercy. It has with it an element of compassion as well. So the request for the son or the ruler to extend this, and then I didn't read this, and then he goes on to say, please deal with me in chesed ve'emet. Chesed ve'emet, a very striking phrase. I think this may very well be the first appearance of the phrase in the text of the scriptures. It's a very important phrase that describes God, God's relationship with us, and what God has given to us by means of his words for us. And in fact, that particular emphasis is found in the opening chapters of the book that was written by Yochanan HaShliach, John the Apostle. And it talks about how the Torah came to us through Moses. But the grace and truth, usual English translations, the grace and the truth that is inherent within that Torah is centered in Yeshua the Messiah. Grace and truth. Chesed ve'emet. And so the story begins here. And so the request from Jacob to Joseph is, please deal with me in kindness and in faithfulness. Most of the English translations have at this point, and rightly so. And then we move on to chapter 48, beginning at verse 3. Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me in the land of Canaan, and he blessed me. And he said, I'm going to make you fruitful and increase your numbers. And I will make you a community of peoples, and I will give this land as an everlasting possession to your descendants after you. These words should sound familiar, not just because we heard them, not once when God pronounced them to Jacob, but twice. because remember, he blessed him twice. Same words were transmitted to Isaac. Same words were transmitted to Abraham. In other words, you have a mention here of the renewal of the Abrahamic covenant to Jacob and of God blessing Jacob. God appeared to me and he blessed me. Next thing that we find in our text is Jacob, having been blessed or recalling the blessing, is now ready to bless not his sons, but Joseph's sons, beginning at verse 5. And in fact, he says in verse 5, now the two sons that have been born to you, I'm going to take as my sons. They will not be my grandsons. They will be as if they were my sons. They've been elevated to the status of sonship. So he adopts Ephraim and Manasseh as his own sons. And then in verse 9, he blesses them. And the story is a very interesting story as he blesses them. I'll pick it up in a minute. Israel says, bring them to me that I may bless them. He's ready to pass on the blessing. And then as we look in verse 8 and the beginning of verse 10, once again, we see that Jacob, who's been the actor here, is now consistently being called Israel. In a sense, the emphasis has now been made yet again, that we're moving from the person to the nation. And then, of course, there's the story of the blessing. It goes all the way down to verse 14. What Joseph did is he placed on Jacob's knees his two sons, the elder on the right side, the younger on the left side. Do you remember the story? What does Jacob do? He crosses his hands. He's not cross-eyed, although it causes Joseph to cross his eyes and say, no, you got it wrong. This is the oldest, this is the youngest. And Jacob goes, phew. He understood an important principle coming from God, that he lived out himself. God doesn't always choose the eldest or the most prominent or even the most intelligent, but those who are willing to serve him. And so God chose Isaac, not Ishmael. Isaac was the younger. He chose Jacob, not Esau. Jacob was the younger. Because these were people that God understood would follow him wholeheartedly. And now, Jacob knows the principle, does the same thing. The younger is blessed and chosen. Okay, then in verses 15 and 16, he blessed Joseph. May the God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who's been my shepherd all my life to this day, and so forth. We've now come full circle. Jacob said he's been blessed, and now he blesses Joseph. The blessing continues, but he says something very interesting. Did you pick that up as I read it? He says that God has shepherded him all his life. That means, as a sheep, he has followed the shepherd all his life. Make no mistake about it, because the text is very clear about this. Anyhow, then he talks about the angel that was part of this whole package. Remember, he was, the first time he was blessed by God, he was asleep, and then the angels ascended and descended on him. And then as he crossed back into Esau's territory, he started out by wrestling what he thought was an angel. Turns out, as he says, Peniel, I have seen God, I've wrestled God face to face. So he talks about that as well. And then in verse 20, we finally get the blessing on the sons. And he says, he blessed them that day, and he said, in your name will Israel pronounce this blessing. In your name, or in your names, it's plural. Ephraim and Manasseh. And what has Israel done? Every Shabbat, down through the centuries, this is the blessing that is passed on to our sons, the sons of Israel, to this day. Verse 21, Israel said to Joseph, I'm about to die, God will be with you, and so forth. He will bring you back into the land, and since he's going to bring you back into the land, make sure he brings me back into the land. In other words, my bones are supposed to go with And so the text concludes in chapter 48. And now that he's done all this blessing, he's done, right? He's ready to die. No, chapter 49 is full of his blessings of his sons. And in this sense, as you read the blessings carefully, they are in fact not only characteristic but predictive. Characteristic of the sons who would become the tribes, but also predictive as to what will be their destiny or their history. In one of the more popular versions of the readings for the week, and from week to week, the Stone Chumash, we're told, and I quote here because it's very perceptive and insightful. Jacob was about to bless the tribes individually, each in line with its own character and ability, so that they would be directed towards the paths for which God had suited them. I love that. So that they can be better directed for the paths for which God suited them. That's the way God operates in our lives too, if we're paying attention. Anyhow, back to the quote. Jacob's blessings would make clear that each of the tribes had its own unique mission. We don't all do the same thing. And then it says, only Jacob could perceive this, because he's the one who's doubly blessed by God, who's been shepherded by God all his life. Anyhow, only Jacob could perceive this. As the zenith of the patriarchal and matriarchal era, Jacob had the ability to understand, catch that, the ability to understand each son's role in the scheme of the cosmos. In other words, as part of the plan and purpose of God throughout history and for the universe. Anyhow, back to this. And as he blessed them, he assigned his sons to their respective missions accordingly. It's a very important insight, very useful for us to understand. And we can see part of that. In other words, what he's doing, he's spelling out for them their history, their destiny, as a vital part of the purpose of God through the history of the world. And one of those blessings was read to you as well. It's from 49 verses 8 to 11. You know, it's the one about Judah. The scepter, the emblem of the rule, will not depart from Judah until Shiloh. Later commentators consider that a messianic image shall come. And then it talks about a donkey and its colt and all those wonderful things. This becomes the indicator of the destiny of Judah to be the tribe from which the Messiah would come. Why a donkey and a colt? Well, some people take the passage poetically and say they both refer to the same thing, and poetically that's the way in which Hebrew poetry operates. But others take it quite literally. In fact, the Gospel of Matthew points out that when Yeshua came riding in, he came riding in on what? Nope. A donkey and a colt. Oh, yes. The point was not only to take us back to Zechariah, where the passage is predictive, but to take us back to this original blessing of destiny. There's much more there, but we got to skip ahead to chapter 50, or we'll never get through this. And then I love this particular section. Joseph is about to die. Jacob has died, sorry. Jacob has died, and before Joseph is about to die, his brothers are afraid that they will go first. Why? Because Papa's no longer there to protect them. So they panic, and they come to Joseph, and they, in one sense, express their panic. And what does Joseph say? Verses 19 to 21. He says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of me. Am I in the place of God? Very interesting that he would say that. Because in Egypt, he was in the place of God. We read the text last week. They considered Joseph to be like Pharaoh. They considered Pharaoh to be like God, to actually be the Son of God. So he's reminding them that the Egyptian mythology is not something they need to worry about. And then here's a wonderful passage. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, namely the saving of many lives. Boy, isn't that perceptive? And so then he assures them, so don't be afraid. I will provide for you. Not just for you, but for you and your children. And so he reassured them as he spoke kindly to them. In other words, what God did here was to turn a curse into a blessing. He took what was evil and turned it into good. Now, this should sound familiar to us, as this is as part of the nature of the God whom we are here to serve, because he's done this before, and it's been reflected on before. In the book of Acts, Shimon, Ashliach, Peter the Apostle, and the others are praying. And they're concerned about some of the opposition they're facing. And here's what their prayer is. They say, indeed, Herod and Pontius Pilate met together with the Gentiles and the people of Israel in this city. Oh, by the way, notice the order of blame here. We're last on the list, not first on the list, as is far too frequently mistold. Anyhow, back to the text. They met together to conspire against your holy servant Yeshua, whom you anointed. But they did what your power and will had decided beforehand should happen. And we stand up and cheer. I didn't see anybody do that. But anyhow, you get the point. But don't miss the point. They just got finished quoting Psalm 2, and there's a reason. Because God had already said this is the kind of thing that would take place back in Psalm 2. Why do the nations conspire? The psalm begins. Conspire, same as in Acts. And the peoples plot in vain. The kings of the earth rise up, and the rulers band against the Lord. Yeah, like Herod and Pontius Pilate. Against the Lord and against his anointed, the same as you find in this prayer, his Messiah. But the one enthroned in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. I have installed my king on Zion, my holy mountain. I have made sure that the king got to where he's supposed to. So, the psalmist says, I will proclaim the Lord's decree, or the one who's being addressed says. He said to me, you are my son. Today I've become your father. Interesting phrasing. But this, in effect, is what the prayer in Acts was to remind us of, because guess what? The people who prayed that prayer, the people who heard that prayer, prayed, and those who read the text later, they knew that this was coming directly from Psalm 2, even if we may not have known it. Anyhow, ask me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. Therefore, you kings, be wise, be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, celebrate his rule with trembling. And then the text concludes, kiss his son, because blessed, oh, we get blessed again, are those who take refuge in him. This closing text of Genesis 50 is meant to reinforce the fact of the faithfulness and the kindness of God. You know, it began with Chesed ve'emet, as well as to remind us of the graciousness of God. But it also tells us something of the complete commitment to the covenant promises and relationship that is there on God's part. In other words, God had taken an oath like Jacob requested Joseph do for him at the beginning of our text. And this graciousness of God and his faithfulness and kindness was counted on and in fact reinforced by Joseph, because at the end of chapter 50, as his father had requested, so now Joseph requests. He says to his brothers, God's going to take you back to the land as he promised. He's committed to his covenant. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to take me with you. Take my bones with you. A number of years ago, interestingly enough, this is an aside in case you haven't figured it out. Just in case you haven't figured it out, let me illustrate it. A number of years ago, we had in this very room a seminar from I think a British archaeologist. And one of the things, as he unwrapped some very interesting things in his seminar, and I'm trying to remember his name, but I've lost it offhand. He showed to us what is in all likelihood the actual grave of Joseph. And guess what? There was no mummy in the sarcophagus. Interesting. Anyhow, back to our text. Joseph's request is identical in nature and terminology to his father's. His request is based on the same assurance that his father had. And now we've come yet again full circle from the beginning to the end of the parsha. Therefore, hopefully reinforcing the lessons for us about the faithfulness and the kindness of God, about the graciousness of God, about his concrete commitment to his covenant promises and relationship. But there's another pattern, and I forget when I discovered this in the lives of the patriarchs here. And if you look at the sermon notes, you'll find the pattern. Abraham, we're told, lived 175 years. Isaac, we're told, lived 180 years. Jacob, we're told, lived 147 years. If you factor this out, as I've done for you, you might see a potential answer to the question, why this particular number of years? Well, take a look at what I've given you in your notes. Abraham lived 5 times 5 times 7 years. Isaac lived 6 times 6 times 5 years. And Jacob lived 7 times 7 times 3 years. And if you add all the particular roots together, in each case it's 17. Intriguing math. Now, this is not gematria or numerology. This is just mathematics. But it indicates something, I think, that is at least insightful. There's a progression that takes place from 5 to 6 to 7. But it's based on the same principles because they each add up to 17. I'm going to suggest that that indicates for us something that's indicated throughout the history of God's working on our behalf. It's the clear pattern, it indicates a clear pattern of connection in the lives of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. And it also indicates a clear purpose of God in their history. If we can just add and subtract and multiply numbers, I know here you're just adding and multiplying numbers, you can see some of the pattern. And this recognition, as well as the recognition we should have derived from this passage, should remind us of two things. It should provide us with confidence and assurance regarding God and the covenant made with us. Which is why so often when we recite certain texts of Scripture or prayers, we end them with Amen. So be it. In other words, I'm confident, I have the assurance that God will do exactly what he said. But it should also not only provide confidence and assurance regarding God and his covenant promises, it should produce peace and serenity and tranquility regarding our lives and circumstances, as it shows. And he has shown for us in their lives and circumstances. That provides us with what we know of as shalom. Peace, serenity, tranquility. One of you sent this to me many years ago, and I filed it like I do with some of my email. Others' email becomes spam, but you understand how that works. It's called It Depends Whose Hands It's In. And I think this summarizes for us a good part of the lesson for this evening. A basketball in my hands is worth about $20 or whatever I pay for it. A basketball in LeBron James's hands is worth exactly $154 million. It depends on whose hands it's in. A baseball in my hands, which I love having there, is worth about $8 or $10 or whatever it might cost me to buy it. But in pitcher Garrett Cole's hands, it's worth $324 million, which is what the Yankees are beginning to pay him. It depends on whose hands it's in. A tennis racket is it's not quite useless in my hands, but nearly useless. A tennis racket in Serena Williams' hands is a Wimbledon championship or several. It depends whose hands it's in. A rod in my hands will keep away a wild animal if I don't drop it on my way to escape the situation. Anyhow, a rod in Moses' hands will part the mighty sea. It depends whose hands it's in. A slingshot in my hands is a kid's toy. A slingshot in David's hand is a mighty weapon. It depends whose hands it's in. 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread in my hands is several fish sandwiches and a lot of extra bread. 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread in God's hands will feed thousands. It depends on whose hands it's in. Nails in my hands might produce a birdhouse. on my better days. Nails in Yeshua's hands will produce the restoration of the entire world and cosmos. It depends whose hands it's in. As you see now, it all depends whose hands it's in. So put your concerns, your worries, your fears, your hopes, your dreams, your families, and your relationships in God's hands, because it depends whose hands it's in. And let me add, and the result will be a blessing, God's blessing on your heads. Take the next minute or so in quiet as you respond to God's hand reaching out to you. Chesed ve'emet, faithfulness and kindness. The culmination of all that takes place in a time we anticipate, the time of the Messianic age, the time of the eternal Shabbat. We anticipate it on pages 102 to 107 as we respond and look forward to the time when the world will be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, when all abominations shall cease, and he will be Lord over the world. The time of the kingdom of David's greater son. Please rise, joining us on pages 102 to 107. And before we start, a quick reminder. A reminder while the static subsides. There is one line that is said while bowing. One line. If you're not sure which line it is, follow the cantor, like I said at the beginning. If in doubt, throughout the service, always follow the cantor.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשינו לפגוע הרצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים וגוסר הארץ, ומושל יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגבי מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אינות, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשב אותה אל לבבך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת עינו. It is incumbent upon us to praise the Master of all, to exalt the Creator of the world, for he has made us distinct from the nations and unique among the families of the earth. Our destiny is not like theirs. Our calling is our task. We bow down and acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like him. For he stretched forth the heavens like a tent and established the earth. Truly, there is none like our Lord and King. As the Torah says, you shall know this day and reflect in your heart that it is the Lord who is God in the heavens above, and on the earth beneath there is none else. We hope, O Lord our God, to soon behold your majestic glory, when all abominations shall be removed, and all false gods shall be at an end. Then shall the world be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, and all mankind shall call upon your name. For to you every knee must bow, and every tongue declare that you are God. Reign over us soon and forever. May the kingdom of David's greater Son be established forever. For then shall the words be fulfilled, the Lord shall be king forever, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz. Vayom hahu yihyeh Adonai echad. U'shemo echad.
Okay, this is the time where we play the game, The Last Person Standing.
I win.
And he comes forward to take his place.